Our neighborhood had always been quiet, the kind of place where kids played outside until dusk and neighbors exchanged hellos over white picket fences. That was until Karen moved in. You know the type, the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, the one who has a checklist for everyone else's business but conveniently ignores her own. Karen was HOA royalty, or at least she liked to think so. She carried herself like she was the mayor, sheriff, and judge, all rolled into one, armed with the HOA's rulebook that she knew better than anyone else. She was the kind of person who saw herself as the guardian of community standards, wielding her master key to every gate, door, and mailbox like a badge of honor. It was early on a Saturday morning when Karen first showed up at our gate. We had recently installed a new security system, fancier than the usual keypad code or old-fashioned lock. Our gate had a state-of-the-art electronic lock that required individual authorization for entry, something the HOA hadn't fully wrapped their heads around yet. Karen wasn't pleased. She wanted access, and since she was the chairperson of the HOA, she insisted she had the right to get in any time she wanted. She proudly brandished her so-called master key, a bulky, customized electronic device handed out to HOA board members and a few trusted residents. That day, she stomped up to the gate, slammed her device on the keypad, and glared. Nothing. No beep, no click, no opening gate. The master key failed. She tried again, louder and more aggressively, pressing buttons like a pianist going for a high note. Still nothing. Karen's expression shifted from frustration to outright rage. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. She even tried fiddling with the old-fashioned keypad, but the system had been upgraded. No old keys, no codes. It was electronic or nothing. I happened to be in my backyard at the time and noticed the commotion. My wife, Lisa, was inside the house, busy preparing breakfast, unaware that this was about to become much more than just a routine confrontation. Karen's temper flared and she began knocking on the gate. "Open up! I'm the HOA president. You can't keep me out," she yelled. Her voice carried enough for the neighbors to start peeking from their windows. I stepped forward from the shadows. "Karen, the system is new. Your master key doesn't have access to this gate." I kept my voice calm but firm. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you to tell me that? I pay HOA dues just like everyone else. I have every right to get in." "Of course," I said, "but this gate is on our property line. You're welcome to visit, but you'll need to be buzzed in. The master key only works for common areas managed by the HOA." She scoffed. "That's absurd. This is a gated community. Your gate is part of the community." I shook my head. "No, it's a private gate on our property. The HOA doesn't control this." The neighbors, now fully awake and curious, gathered around. Karen's posture stiffened, and she looked around for backup. This wasn't going according to her plan. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling, and started dialing. "I'm calling 911, she declared. "This is harassment. I'm being denied entry to community property." I sighed, sensing things were about to escalate beyond a simple misunderstanding. Just then, Lisa came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a towel. She saw Karen, tense and angry, and me trying to keep the situation from exploding. "Is there a problem?" Lisa asked, her voice calm but authoritative. Karen froze mid-dial, clearly not expecting this. Lisa stepped down from the porch and approached the gate. "Karen, this gate isn't under HOA jurisdiction. You don't have access here. Let's keep things civil." Karen blinked, then fumbled with her phone, finally hanging up before the call connected. The tension hung thick in the air. Karen's fiery personality was meeting its match in Lisa, who had a presence that commanded respect without shouting. As Karen reluctantly backed away from the gate, I realized this was only the beginning. The master key might have failed today, but Karen's ego wouldn't accept defeat so easily. And what she didn't know, what no one did, was that Lisa wasn't just a homeowner. She was the police chief of our town, a fact that would soon turn this neighborhood drama upside down. The morning after Karen's failed gate attempt, our neighborhood was buzzing. The story of the HOA chairperson being locked out of what she considered her community was quickly turning into the talk of the block. Texts and whispers spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know what had happened and what would come next. Meanwhile, Karen was stewing in her frustration. How could a so-called master key fail her? She prided herself on knowing every nook and cranny of the HOA's bylaws, every access code, every rule, and every privilege. Her master key was more than a tool. It was a symbol of her authority, the emblem of her self-assigned crown. The irony was that the master key wasn't even a physical key, but a complex electronic fob linked to the HOA's outdated access system, a system she personally helped manage. The system was supposed to grant her and other board members access to all common gates, storage sheds, and community facilities. It was designed to make her job easier, to give her a seamless ability to oversee the neighborhood. But this new gate at our property line was different. We had installed it precisely because we wanted to upgrade security for our home. This gate operated on an independent system, completely separate from the HOA infrastructure, with biometric scanners and encrypted codes. No master key was authorized for it. Karen's device simply couldn't communicate with our system, and her frustration was palpable. Determined to not let this slight go unanswered, Karen decided to escalate matters. She spent the next day contacting HOA vendors, security system experts, and board members, demanding explanations and a solution. During one of her calls with the company that installed the gate, she even raised her voice, accusing them of negligence and betraying the community. She was convinced the company should have made her master key compatible, or at least provided some kind of override. Her tirades only exposed her lack of understanding about private property rights versus HOA jurisdiction. She was treating the gate like a public utility, failing to grasp that what she thought was a communal space was actually private. Meanwhile, Lisa and I discussed the situation carefully. We knew Karen's stubbornness would only increase, and her attempts to force access might breach boundaries or even legal lines. Lisa reminded me, we need to be clear on the property lines and HOA authority. The last thing we want is a legal battle or public confrontation. I agreed. But we also can't let her run roughshod over our security and privacy. The HOA board convened a meeting that week, invited by Karen to discuss the gate controversy. It was a tense gathering, with Karen insisting the gate was a community access point, while several residents sided with us, understanding the nuances of private property and personal security. Karen attempted to rally support, waving around her master key as if it were the Excalibur of neighborhood governance. However, some board members were beginning to question her judgment, sensing that she might be overreaching. Meanwhile, Karen's phone started ringing incessantly, not just from neighbors, but from HOA attorneys and security consultants. They warned her about potential liability if she tried to force entry or tampered with someone's private gate. Unfazed, Karen devised a backup plan. If the electronic master key didn't work, she would try physical means, climbing the gate, using bolt cutters, or even calling in official help. But little did she know, Lisa was already preparing for what might come next. Lisa, the police chief, took this situation seriously, not because Karen was HOA chairperson, but because unauthorized entry and harassment were legal matters. Lisa reached out quietly to her department's legal advisors, ensuring they were ready to intervene if Karen's actions escalated. We also reviewed our security footage, which showed Karen's frustrated attempts and her knocking and yelling at the gate. The footage was clear. No threat, but clear trespassing attempts. The next day, Karen showed up again, this time accompanied by a few other HOA board members who apparently wanted to support her cause. They tried to use their own master keys on the gate. Same result, failure. Karen, however, was livid. "This is unacceptable. We have the right to enter. This gate is an obstacle to community safety." Lisa calmly stepped outside, her presence commanding attention. "Karen, the gate is not community property. Please respect our privacy." Karen's expression darkened, but she begrudgingly backed off. This time. Yet she was plotting. The master key failure had become a personal affront. She wasn't just fighting a gate. She was fighting for her perceived power and control. The saga was far from over. What Karen didn't expect was that the gate wasn't the only thing protected. Behind that security system was a family ready to defend their home, and a police chief who knew exactly how to handle the delicate balance between authority and rights. As the days passed, the neighborhood waited, holding its breath, wondering how long Karen's obsession with her master key would last, and what price she would pay for pushing boundaries that weren't hers to cross. The atmosphere in the neighborhood was thick with tension as Karen's gate saga continued to unfold. What started as a minor inconvenience, her master key failing at our gate, soon snowballed into a full-blown power struggle, with Karen squarely in the middle, fighting a battle she barely understood. To Karen, the gate represented control. It was more than just a barrier made of steel and electronics. It was a symbol of authority, order, and the power she believed she held over the neighborhood. But for us, the gate was about privacy, security, and protecting our home from unwanted intrusion, principles Karen seemed determined to ignore. The HOA, under Karen's leadership, operated with a peculiar mindset. They believed that the entire community, every inch of it, was theirs to manage, regulate, and enforce. HOA meetings were often dominated by Karen's voice, booming across the room as she laid down rules that sometimes seemed more about exerting control than preserving harmony. Residents grew wary. While most appreciated the order the HOA brought, many began to see cracks in the facade, especially as Karen's behavior grew more overbearing. Stories circulated about petty fines, aggressive rule enforcement, and a growing list of residents who felt marginalized or unfairly targeted. The gate controversy exposed all these simmering issues. On a sunny Thursday afternoon, a large group of HOA board members and residents gathered for what was supposed to be a routine meeting. The agenda: discuss community maintenance and upcoming events. But, unsurprisingly, the gate was front and center. Karen, flushed with determination, marched into the room holding her master key like a trophy. "This gate is a threat to community safety," she announced. "It blocks authorized access and undermines our authority." Several residents exchanged uneasy glances. "It's our property," I said firmly from the back. "We installed this gate to protect our home. It's not under HOA jurisdiction." Karen's eyes narrowed. "It's still within the community boundaries. The HOA governs all common areas and any gates within the community." Lisa stood beside me, calm and steady. "That's not how property law works. Private property rights are protected by state law. HOA rules can't override that." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some residents nodded in agreement, while others looked confused, caught between loyalty to the HOA and the rights of neighbors. Karen's voice grew louder. "This is about community safety. We can't allow individual homeowners to create barriers that block emergency access or disrupt community flow." Lisa shook her head. "We ensured emergency services have full access. We coordinated with the fire department and police to guarantee that." The gate's security measures include override codes for emergencies. Karen's face reddened. I don't trust that. We need full access now. At that moment, an HOA board member raised a hand. Karen, maybe we need to rethink our approach here. This gate isn't part of the common areas. If we push too hard, we could face legal challenges. Karen glared at the voice. We are the HOA. We enforce rules. But we're not above the law, another resident interjected. The meeting devolved into heated debate. It was clear that Karen's vision of the HOA as an all-powerful entity was being challenged. Outside, word spread quickly about the meeting's drama. Some neighbors felt empowered, glad to see their rights being defended. Others worried about divisions fracturing the community. Meanwhile, Karen didn't back down. She continued to circulate emails, calling for stricter enforcement of HOA policies and demanding the master key be updated to include access to all gates, including private ones. Lisa and I stayed vigilant, documenting everything. We knew Karen's persistence wasn't just about the gate. It was about maintaining a grip on control, even if it meant crossing legal and ethical boundaries. Our gate had become a flashpoint, a symbol of resistance against unchecked authority. The HOA's false sense of control was unraveling, and Karen was at the center of the storm. What no one realized yet was that this gate war was about to bring unexpected consequences, ones that would involve not only the HOA, but also law enforcement, community trust, and the very meaning of privacy and authority in our neighborhood. And Lisa, as police chief, was uniquely positioned to navigate these stormy waters, balancing her role as enforcer of the law with being a neighbor, wife, and defender of what we held dear. The battle lines were drawn, but the outcome was far from certain. After days of escalating tension, Karen's frustration reached a boiling point. The failed master key, the closed gate, the HOA meetings that weren't going her way, all of it gnawed at her ego like a persistent itch. But the final straw came on a Tuesday morning when, in a fit of desperation, Karen made a decision that would change everything. She called 911. It happened just after 9 a.m., on a bright, warm day when most neighbors were either at work or running errands. Karen stormed up to our gate again, this time more aggressive than before. She had her phone in hand, fingers trembling as she dialed. "Hello, this is an emergency," she told the dispatcher, her voice sharp and breathless. "I'm being denied access to community property. Someone is blocking me from entering, and I'm afraid there's some kind of harassment going on." She rattled off our address and explained the situation from her perspective, painting herself as the victim of an unreasonable homeowner who refused to comply with community rules. The dispatcher listened patiently, making notes and assuring Karen that officers would be dispatched to assess the situation. Karen hung up the phone with a sense of triumph. She believed that calling 911 would force our hand, that law enforcement would side with her and pressure us to unlock the gate. But she didn't realize who lived on the other side. Lisa had just finished a conference call in the next room when she saw Karen pacing impatiently outside. The 911 call came through on the police radio moments later. Lisa's expression shifted instantly from calm to alert. She knew the situation was more complicated than a simple gate dispute. "That's Karen," she said quietly. "She called 911 on us." I looked at her, surprised. "Seriously? She actually called the cops?" Lisa nodded, already pulling on her jacket. "I'm the chief here. I'll respond personally." Within minutes, Lisa was out the door, headed toward the gate with the official authority and personal stake in this unfolding drama. When she arrived, Karen was waiting by the gate, arms crossed, clearly expecting support from law enforcement. Lisa approached steadily, her police chief badge visible on her jacket. "Karen," Lisa said, her voice firm but measured, I'm here now. Let's talk. Karen's eyes widened in shock. Lisa, what are you doing here? I called the police because I was being harassed. Lisa took a breath. I know. I'm the police chief. You called me. The crowd of neighbors who had gathered nearby murmured in surprise. The dynamic shifted instantly. Karen's bravado faltered. She looked at Lisa, realizing that her plan had backfired spectacularly. Lisa continued, I understand you're frustrated, but this is a private gate on private property. You don't have automatic access. The HOA rules don't override the law or property rights. Karen attempted to defend herself, but Lisa's calm, authoritative presence diffused the situation. Let me be clear, Lisa said. If you attempt unauthorized entry or harassment again, we will have to take appropriate legal action. Karen's face flushed. She looked away, realizing the gravity of the warning. The neighbors, many of whom had been watching silently, began to whisper among themselves. Some admired Lisa's professionalism, others felt vindicated that someone was finally standing up to Karen's overreach. Lisa stayed for a few more minutes, ensuring the situation was calm. She spoke with Karen privately, explaining the boundaries clearly and outlining consequences if the harassment continued. Afterward, Lisa returned inside, closing the gate behind her. The atmosphere was heavy with relief and apprehension. Karen left, defeated for now, but undoubtedly plotting her next move. That 911 call became a pivotal moment, not just a failed attempt by Karen to assert control, but a turning point that exposed the limits of HOA power and highlighted the importance of respecting private property and personal boundaries. It also revealed the unique challenge Lisa faced, enforcing the law impartially while navigating the personal complexities of a small community and her own family's role in it. The neighborhood was watching closely now, aware that things were escalating beyond mere HOA squabbles. The question on everyone's mind was how far Karen would go and what consequences would follow. After the 911 incident, word spread quickly throughout our neighborhood. People were whispering in driveways, swapping messages on community apps, and speculating about what had really happened. But what no one expected was the bombshell that dropped when Karen realized who had shown up in response to her call. The police chief herself, my wife, Lisa. Lisa's position as the town's police chief wasn't exactly a secret, but it wasn't something we advertised either. We kept our professional and personal lives separate, especially here in the neighborhood. We wanted to be seen as just another family, not the law enforcement power couple who might intimidate others. But with Karen's call and Lisa's arrival at the gate, that separation instantly dissolved. The moment Karen recognized Lisa, the air changed. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in thinly veiled irritation. "You're the chief," she hissed, a mixture of disbelief and begrudging respect coloring her tone. Lisa nodded calmly. "Yes, I am, and that's why I took your 911 call seriously." Karen's bravado slipped away in that instant. She had expected the police to side with her automatically, or at least treat the situation with a kind of bureaucratic neutrality. But facing Lisa, who knew the neighborhood, the people involved, and the facts firsthand, was a different story entirely. Word got out fast, and before long, neighbors who had once looked at us as just the quiet couple down the street began treating us differently. Some sought Lisa out for advice or protection, others eyed us warily, unsure whether our influence might tip future disputes. Behind the badge, Lisa was still my wife, the same person who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and laughed at my terrible jokes. But now her authority was undeniably a part of our neighborhood dynamic. That evening, as the sun set and the neighborhood grew quiet, Lisa and I sat down to talk about what had happened and what was coming next. "This isn't just an HOA dispute anymore," Lisa said, her voice low but firm. Karen's making this personal. She's testing boundaries, and she's trying to use community rules as a weapon. I nodded. She's never liked that we installed that gate. It's like she thinks it's a challenge to her authority. It is, Lisa agreed. And now that people know I'm involved, it's become even more complicated. I'm the chief, yes, but I'm also your wife and a neighbor. That dual role isn't easy to navigate. I asked, how do you plan to handle it? Lisa paused. Carefully, professionally. I have to enforce the law impartially, even if it means butting heads with people we know. And I have to protect our family's privacy and safety. As police chief, Lisa was accustomed to managing conflicts, diffusing tense situations, and maintaining order. But this wasn't a typical call or a routine case. This was a battle unfolding in our own backyard. The community's trust in Lisa's leadership was on the line. If Karen's campaign against us escalated, it could affect not just our family, but the entire neighborhood's sense of safety and fairness. Meanwhile, Karen's response was predictable. She doubled down. Emails flooded the HOA board, demanding investigations, questioning Lisa's impartiality, and calling for new policies that would limit individual homeowners' rights. Some residents supported Karen, believing the police chief's involvement gave us unfair advantage. Others sided with us, appreciating the need for boundaries and respecting private property. The split was growing. In the middle of it all, Lisa remained composed. She held private meetings with the town's legal team and community leaders to ensure the situation stayed within legal boundaries. She made it clear that harassment, trespassing, or intimidation wouldn't be tolerated, regardless of who was involved. The dual role Lisa carried, chief of police and neighbor, became a tightrope walk. She was a symbol of law and order, yet also a human being entangled in the same neighborhood politics and personal disputes as everyone else. Through it all, I stood by her side, knowing that together we had to protect our home and community, not just with security systems or HOA rules, but with clear, firm principles backed by the law. Karen's next moves would test all of that, and behind the badge, Lisa was ready. The day Karen came face to face with Lisa in an official capacity was the day the entire neighborhood took notice. Until then, Karen had been dismissive, treating the master key debacle and gate dispute like a petty HOA squabble, something to be managed by passive resistance or passive-aggressive emails. But with Lisa's dual role as both our neighbor and police chief, the stakes were suddenly much higher. It started with a formal notice Karen sent to our home, demanding a meeting to resolve the gate access issue once and for all. Her tone was both demanding and condescending, typical of her style. She believed that authority was something you claimed, not earned. Lisa, knowing how important it was to de-escalate the situation while standing firm on legal boundaries, agreed to meet Karen, but only in an official capacity with a mediator present. We arranged to meet at the community center, a neutral ground chosen to avoid any appearance of intimidation or favoritism. Several HOA board members, the community manager, and a legal advisor attended as witnesses and moderators. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, wearing her usual expression of righteous indignation. She carried her master key in one hand and a thick binder full of HOA rules and letters in the other. Her eyes scanned the room as if it were a courtroom and she were the judge. Lisa greeted her calmly. "Karen, thank you for coming. I want to make sure we understand each other clearly." Karen smirked. "Oh, we will. I'm here to reclaim what's rightfully the HOA's access to the community." Lisa's voice was steady. "The gate in question is on private property, not under HOA control. Your master key does not grant access here." Karen narrowed her eyes. The gate is within community boundaries. Denying entry is dangerous and illegal. Lisa shook her head. That's incorrect. Property law supersedes HOA bylaws when it comes to private property. We've coordinated with emergency services to ensure they have full access if needed. At that moment, the community manager interjected, Karen, legally, the HOA cannot enforce rules on private property. This has been reviewed by our legal counsel. Karen's expression flickered, but she quickly recovered. I've sent this issue to our attorney as well. We may need to escalate this. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Escalate to what? You understand that harassment and trespassing are criminal offenses. Karen's facade cracked for a split second, but she masked it with defiance. The mediator stepped in. Let's keep this productive. Karen, is there a specific resolution you seek? Karen held up her master key. I want the system updated so my key can open that gate. It's a community entrance now, whether anyone likes it or not. Lisa responded firmly. That will not happen. Changing the gate's system would violate private property rights. This gate protects our home and family. The room was tense. Karen's supporters muttered among themselves, while others nodded in quiet agreement with Lisa. After hours of discussion, the meeting ended with no compromise. Karen refused to back down, but it was clear her legal arguments were weak. Lisa summarized the situation. Our home's security and privacy are not negotiable. We respect the HOA's authority over common areas, but not private property. Karen left them. After the formal meeting between Karen and Lisa, the quiet neighborhood we once knew felt like it had split in two. What had begun as a simple dispute over a gate and a master key had spiraled into a full-blown community conflict. Neighbors who once exchanged friendly hellos now glanced sideways with suspicion, and conversations were tinged with underlying tension. The dividing lines in the neighborhood became unmistakable. On one side were Karen's allies, residents who supported the HOA chairperson's vision of centralized control, strict adherence to HOA rules, and what they saw as necessary oversight to maintain order. These neighbors feared that allowing individual homeowners like us to set up private gates was a slippery slope toward chaos, where anyone could disregard community standards. On the other side were residents who sympathized with our stance, that private property rights and personal security should never be overridden by HOA power. They admired Lisa's calm and principled handling of the situation and saw Karen's aggressive tactics as overreach and bullying. The polarization was painful. Block parties dwindled. Shared spaces felt less communal. Even casual encounters were strained as neighbors tried to pick sides or avoid conflict altogether. Karen's campaign against us didn't stop with meetings and emails. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, accusing us of undermining community safety. Anonymous posts circulated on neighborhood social media pages, spreading misinformation and casting doubt on Lisa's impartiality as police chief. The hashtag #GateGate trended in our little corner of the internet, a sarcastic label mocking the entire ordeal. At times, it felt like the entire neighborhood was a chessboard, with Karen moving pieces aggressively and Lisa responding strategically, but trying not to escalate beyond what was necessary. Behind the scenes, Karen tried to rally more support from the HOA board to implement new policies that would give the HOA expanded authority over private property access points. She pushed for mandatory integration of all gates into the HOA's master system, hoping to eliminate any possibility of individual homeowners circumventing HOA control. The board meetings became battlegrounds. Arguments grew heated. Some members questioned Karen's leadership, concerned that her obsession with the gate dispute was overshadowing more important community issues like landscaping, street maintenance, and safety patrols. Others sided firmly with Karen, believing that strong enforcement was key to preserving property values and neighborhood prestige. Lisa and I watched all this unfold with heavy hearts. We loved our neighborhood, but the unity we had once cherished was unraveling. Lisa's role was particularly complex. As police chief, she had a responsibility to enforce the law fairly and protect all residents equally, regardless of their opinions or allegiances. But as our neighbor and family, she felt the personal toll of the conflict deeply. One evening, after a long day of meetings and community calls, Lisa sat at the kitchen table, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "This isn't just about a gate anymore," she said softly. "It's about trust, about how people see law enforcement and community leadership. We have to rebuild bridges, or this division will only get worse." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "What can we do? How do we help heal this?" Lisa considered. "We start by listening, by being visible but approachable, by showing that the law is here to protect everyone, not just us." In the weeks that followed, Lisa spearheaded community outreach efforts, neighborhood safety workshops, casual meet-and-greet events at the police station, and open forums designed to encourage dialogue rather than division. Slowly, some neighbors began to thaw. Conversations resumed. People realized that while opinions differed, the shared goal was a safe, peaceful community. Karen, however, grew increasingly isolated. Her aggressive stance alienated more board members, and her influence waned. Some neighbors who once backed her quietly distanced themselves, concerned about the conflict's impact on community morale. Still, Karen didn't back down. She doubled down on legal threats, hinting at lawsuits and regulatory complaints. Lisa and I braced ourselves for whatever might come next. The neighborhood was no longer just a place we lived. It was a microcosm of a larger struggle over power, respect, and the delicate balance between individual rights and community rules. And in the middle of it all stood a gate, a simple barrier that had opened a Pandora's box. As tensions simmered in the neighborhood and community relations frayed, it became clear that Karen was ready to escalate the battle beyond meetings, social media, and informal disputes. The gate war was about to enter the courtroom, a place where rules were strict, arguments formal, and consequences far-reaching. Karen's threats of legal action were no longer empty. One morning, we received a formal letter from the HOA's attorney, copied to our home and the community board. The letter alleged that our gate installation violated HOA covenants and demanded immediate removal or modification to allow HOA access using the master key. It cited sections of the community bylaws that Karen and her legal team claimed gave the HOA authority over all access points within the neighborhood. Reading the letter, I felt a mixture of frustration and resolve. The claims were baseless. Our gate was clearly on private property, installed after following all local codes and after receiving no objections from municipal authorities. Still, the letter was a clear sign that the conflict had entered a new, more dangerous phase. Lisa and I immediately consulted with our own attorney, a specialist in property and HOA law. She assured us that while HOAs wield significant power in regulating common areas, private property rights were strongly protected under state law. Any attempt by the HOA to force access or control over private property could be legally challenged and was likely to fail in court. However, she warned, lawsuits, even frivolous ones, could drag on for months or years, draining time, money, and community goodwill. Karen, emboldened by legal counsel, pushed the HOA board to vote on filing a lawsuit if we did not comply with their demands. The vote was contentious. Some board members were uncomfortable with escalating to litigation, fearing it would destroy neighborly relations and reflect poorly on the HOA. Others sided with Karen, convinced that a firm legal stance was necessary to preserve authority. Behind the scenes, we prepared our defense, gathering documentation of property deeds, permits, emergency access agreements, and communications showing the HOA's lack of jurisdiction over the gate. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors about the impending court battle. Some residents expressed sympathy for Karen's position, citing fears of setting a precedent where homeowners could disregard HOA rules at will. Others rallied behind us, emphasizing the importance of respecting private property rights and the rule of law. Lisa found herself in a delicate position. As police chief, she remained committed to impartial law enforcement, but as our advocate, she understood the personal and community stakes. One afternoon, Lisa met privately with the HOA board's legal advisor to discuss options short of litigation. She emphasized the benefits of mediation and community dialogue, warning that court battles often leave everyone worse off. The legal advisor nodded, but reminded Lisa that the HOA's fiduciary duty compelled them to enforce covenants consistently. Meanwhile, Karen's public messaging became more aggressive. She sent letters to all residents portraying us as lawbreakers and threats to community cohesion. The neighborhood association's newsletter featured editorials supporting strict enforcement and criticizing gate privatization. This campaign stirred further division, with several residents writing back in defense of property rights and privacy. Our lawyer suggested filing a declaratory judgment action, essentially asking the court to clarify property rights and HOA authority to prevent future conflicts. We agreed, hoping that a clear legal ruling would settle the dispute once and for all. The filing made headlines in local news, bringing unwelcome publicity to our small, quiet community. Karen tried to leverage the media attention, portraying herself as a defender of community values, but many saw through the theatrics. As the court date approached, tensions peaked. Some neighbors worried about the financial and emotional toll. Others feared the impact on property values and neighborhood reputation. Lisa and I prepared ourselves for a challenging process, knowing the outcome would shape the future of our home and community. Behind every legal brief, every negotiation, and every court appearance, the battle over that gate was about more than steel and locks. It was about respect, rights, and the very meaning of home. The morning of the court hearing arrived with an unusual quietness settling over the neighborhood. The gate dispute, which had started as a seemingly minor HOA annoyance, had now become a public legal battle that everyone was talking about. Some residents watched nervously from their windows. Others followed the case in online forums and local news reports. For Lisa and me, the courtroom was where all the months of tension and conflict would finally be addressed, and where the true nature of our neighborhood's future would be decided. We arrived early at the courthouse, documents carefully organized, hearts pounding. Lisa's role as police chief wasn't officially involved in the trial, but her presence carried weight. She sat beside me, calm and resolute, a steady reminder of the strength behind our family's fight for our home. The courtroom was packed, not just with legal representatives, but with neighbors, journalists, and curious onlookers. Karen sat in the front row, clutching her binder of HOA regulations, eyes sharp and expectant. The HOA's attorney opened with a strong statement, asserting that the gate violated HOA covenants and posed a safety risk by restricting emergency access. He painted us as uncooperative homeowners, undermining the community's integrity. Our attorney responded with facts: the gate's placement on private property, the lack of HOA jurisdiction, the coordinated emergency access plans, and the local laws protecting property owners' rights. Witnesses, including a city zoning official and a fire department representative, testified to confirm our claims. Karen's arguments grew more desperate as the hearing progressed, often interrupted by objections and clarifications from the judge. Her insistence that the master key should work everywhere was met with pointed legal rebuttals. Lisa was called to the stand, not as a witness, but to clarify the police department's role in emergency access. She spoke with authority, explaining how the gate's system was integrated with emergency services, ensuring safety without compromising our family's privacy. The judge listened attentively, occasionally asking for clarifications from both sides. Outside the courtroom, tensions ran high. Some neighbors voiced their opinions openly, while others kept their thoughts guarded, wary of picking sides. Throughout the day, it became clear that the case wasn't just a matter of HOA rules. It was a test of individual rights versus community governance, privacy versus shared responsibility. The judge adjourned late in the afternoon, promising a ruling within weeks. As we left the courthouse, the weight of uncertainty was heavy. We knew that regardless of the outcome, the neighborhood's division would not heal overnight. In the days that followed, Lisa and I reflected on the process. The courtroom had exposed the limits of HOA power and underscored the importance of clear communication, legal clarity, and community respect. Karen, meanwhile, continued her campaign outside the court, sending letters, organizing meetings, and rallying support. But the tide was turning. Several board members quietly questioned her approach, concerned that the lawsuit had damaged the HOA's reputation and relationships. Neighbors who had been silent began speaking up in support of our position, urging the HOA to focus on more pressing issues. Weeks later, the judge issued a detailed ruling affirming that the gate was on private property and that the HOA had no authority to mandate access. The court ordered the HOA to cease efforts to force the issue and warned against harassment of the homeowners. The decision was a significant victory, not just for us, but for property rights in the community. The ruling brought relief, but also a sense of responsibility. Lisa and I knew that rebuilding trust and unity would take time and effort. Karen's reaction was predictable. She vowed to appeal, promising to continue fighting for the HOA's vision. Lisa and I braced ourselves for the next chapter, committed to protecting our home while fostering peace in the neighborhood. The courtroom showdown was over, but the battle for community harmony had just begun. The judge's ruling in our favor should have marked the end of the gate dispute, a clear legal victory closing the chapter on months of neighborhood tension. But as Lisa and I soon discovered, winning in court doesn't always translate to immediate peace, especially when emotions have been running high and wounds are still fresh. In the immediate aftermath, the neighborhood felt like a powder keg, quiet on the surface but ready to ignite at the slightest spark. Karen, although officially defeated, refused to retreat quietly. She remained active in HOA meetings and social media, rallying a small but vocal group of supporters who believed the fight was far from over. For us, life felt like walking a tightrope between protecting our family's safety and trying to rebuild bridges with neighbors. The gate, once a symbol of security, now carried new weight, representing resilience but also division. Lisa, with her unique perspective as police chief and neighbor, spearheaded efforts to heal the community. She organized informal gatherings designed to encourage open dialogue, creating spaces where neighbors could voice frustrations without fear of judgment. These events were not always easy. Some residents held on to grudges, while others were reluctant to engage. But over time, a slow thaw began. We also focused on practical measures, upgrading security systems, improving lighting, and collaborating with local law enforcement to enhance neighborhood safety for everyone. At home, Lisa and I found comfort in the routine of everyday life: school runs, weekend hikes, quiet dinners. We reminded ourselves why we chose this neighborhood in the first place: the promise of community, safety, and belonging. Karen's influence gradually waned as the HOA board shifted focus to more inclusive and constructive governance. New leaders emerged, emphasizing transparency, communication, and respect for diverse perspectives. Still, the memory of the conflict lingered. Some neighbors were wary, and occasional passive-aggressive remarks or cold shoulders reminded us that not all wounds healed quickly. One afternoon, while sitting on our porch, a neighbor approached, one who had previously been silent during the dispute. She apologized for the tension, expressing hope that we could move forward together. It was a small but meaningful step toward reconciliation. Lisa and I realized that peace in any community isn't just the absence of conflict. It's the presence of understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. Our experience with the gate dispute and Karen's relentless opposition had tested us in unexpected ways. It challenged our beliefs about power, authority, and community. But it also strengthened us, both as a couple and as part of this neighborhood. Looking back, the journey from that fateful 911 call to the courtroom and beyond was a roller coaster of frustration, resilience, and growth. And while the battle lines might have been drawn, the hope for peace remained stronger. As summer gave way to fall, the neighborhood began to feel like home again, not perfect, but real, complicated, and full of potential. The gate stood firm, not just as a barrier, but as a reminder that protecting what matters most sometimes means standing up for your rights while never losing sight of the community around you.